hello to all of you. Good morning. It is wonderful to be here in Amsterdam. And what a great lead-in that panel was for this next discussion. It's so critical that executive teams see the value of collaboration between security and the business. And based on what they said up here today, I have a new level of confidence in this work going forward. Now we have an opportunity to move in a few clicks to talk about that industry collaboration element, but more specifically to the relationships that you all hold with PCI. In just a moment, I'll be joined on stage by panelists that we have asked to be with us here today based on their representation of unique voices across the payments industry. Here with me will be representatives from a global security services organization. They serve as one of our board of advisors, and they are a principal participating organization. I'll also have and be joined by a qualified security assessor representative and participant on our global executive assessor roundtable group. And then finally, we'll be joined by one of the world's largest merchants, operating in more than 80 countries, and the holder of some very, very well-known brands. I'm a particular fan of their candy products, and it turns out they feed my dogs too. Not chocolate, actual pet food. So that's a snapshot of who'll be joining me up here. And in order to move us to that discussion, please help me welcome them to the stage, and we'll talk more about their roles at their organizations. Well, first, thank you all for joining me. I would like for each of you to introduce yourself to the group here today and to tell us a little bit about the role you play at your organization. So first to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Diana. Nigel Barnes. I come from a company called IDEMIA. We're a major card vendor, so we are producing the card products for our banking customers as a main part. My role within that organization is more around digital transformation of our security systems, so a lot of physical security, logical security, and working closely with our IT colleagues across our organization.
That's me. Andy Barratt from Coalfire. I'm a VP of our assessment services. I focus on the financial services and fintech sector, also representing the community view from Gear as well, so looking forward to that.
Hey everyone.
Jeffrey.
Hey everyone. My name is Jeffrey Moy, and as Diana said, I'm with Mars, which is, everyone knows it's known for candy, but we're also known very much for pet food and pet care. I handle the PCI compliance for Mars, along with my team.
Okay, great. So I'm going to direct some of these questions to you individually and some of these questions to the full panel. So I'm going to start with you, Nigel. As a large global security services organization, you work in the payment space, but also across a number of other industries. That's a big responsibility. In addition to that, your organization has taken on even more responsibility. You've joined PCI SSC as a principal participating organization, the highest level of membership, and you also serve on PCI SSC's board of advisors. So maybe you can share with the audience why your organization has chose to participate at such a high level and the value that that kind of participation, that kind of engagement provides for not only your own organization, but for your downstream customers.
Okay. So the participation part, we've been joined with PCI for probably about 6-7 years now. And recently, our second term was BOA. I'm obviously quite new, as you know. So for me, this is my 8th month working closely with PCI, so very nervous, so thank you very much for patience. The main goal for our participation is looking at our Looking at the background of what PCI can do for us, how we can engage more from understanding your goals, the environment's goals, the community's goals, and take that information into our own organization, see how we can mold that, generally work in a better way, a more understandable way within our own organization. And that value means that we get more buy-in from our business partners, more buy-in from our different siloed own divisions within our own organization. So it's crossing those boundaries and bridging those gaps.
Cool.
Great, thank you. So, Andy, as a representative from a qualified security assessor, you have a critical relationship with PCI SSC, but also with your customers, many of whom are in this room, maybe even on the stage. Can you share something with the audience about the GEAR, the Global Executive Assessor Roundtable Group, that's a mouthful, and the value that that group provides to PCI and the broader community? Because many of our audience members may not be familiar with that group.
Yeah, so for many people, GEAR probably sounds like a nightmare, right? I'm going to put 20 QSAs in a room and get them to agree. Good luck. So, interestingly, that was the origins of GEAR. Was I think back to PCI 1.0 and the land of opinions, as we used to call it, and now we've kind of pivoted over the course of the standards from, I think, an art-based assessment model to more of a science-based assessment model. And the great thing about GEAR is it brings together leaders from the bigger QSA companies to agree on how things should be done collectively. And you think, well, why is that really important? Why do we do that? It's really so that everybody who is a consumer and a recipient of a DSS assessment specifically can rely to some extent on getting a very consistent set of opinions or set of assessment outcomes. So it isn't just about the one person you happen to have doing the assessment for you. And so we will regularly debate like how things are assessed, the language in the standard. We all get challenged on by our customers. You know, does it really mean this? Should it mean that? Like, what's the view of the community? And then it gives us a chance to help influence the council. I think over the years we've made really successive changes, and changes that have then led to really good adoption of technology. I think back to when P2P was first developed, and the journey that went on has been transformative, as I think one of the prior speakers said. So the GEAR gives the QSA community a voice in the standards and the standards design, as well as chance to work with the Board of Advisors more directly.
Yes, very nice. So my third question here, over to you, Jeffrey. I mentioned the fact that you're a large global merchant. Maybe tell us a little bit about the importance of maintaining this relationship with PCI SSC, even as the standards, especially kind of our flagship standard, PCI DSS, have matured.
Yeah, great question. So, you know, it's absolutely critical to maintain a close relationship with the PCI SSC. You know, at Mars, we have over 140 different segments that take credit card payments. So that's a lot of assessments, right? And as you guys can all imagine, you know, there's no two assessments are ever the same. You know, we constantly go through these different scenarios, and you know, it's absolutely vital to you know, to stay with the you know, with the standards. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. So, kind of moving into the next phase of our conversation here. Some of you have longer histories than others working with PCI, specifically Andy, you and Jeff. Nigel, you're a little newer to this, but maybe Andy, you or Jeff could share how you feel the relationship with PCI and the broader PCI community has changed over time.
You want to go first? Shall we go? I'll take that first then.
Take it.
Before I treat Nigel like it's Fight Club and you've got to fight. It's been a really interesting transition from the pre-PCI days. I remember when the schemes all operated their own programs, and I started out as a MasterCard card production assessor. That was my first sort of taste in the PCI world, and then see the standards bodies take ownership and standardize and centralize. So it's just been this kind of continued evolution but then it's become like a maturity curve. So I think you use that kind of 5 stages of grief. It isn't that now. It's now at a point where people go like, we kind of know what to expect, we know how to engage, and even just this week, it reminds me that there are still new participants. I mean, it was great chatting with Nigel, but I actually went out to a client this week in Amsterdam who said, how do we join? I felt like, well, I gave them the spiel about the PO and how to engage, and I have to remind myself as well, like there are still people that this is their first time, and so they have to participate.
Do I need to give you a couple of my cards?
If you want.
Anything to add there?
I think that the speed of things that have been, the things that have been going on, is something that I've noticed over time. I think with social media and LinkedIn, just the way to connect with people, it's far easier to connect with folks than ever. And I think this is something that we should use, especially since we're, now becoming this cashless society, basically, right?
Great, and I think that's a good transition into that next conversation and this next question I have for you. When I think about the executive discussion that was being held here, they're talking about security at the executive level. It really gave us kind of some insight into how they see the role of security and how important that is in the internal collaboration. I would love it if you could share some things that you do within your own organizations to ensure that your executive teams stay connected and continue to see the high priority of the security work that you're doing. Nigel?
Okay, so recently, I think over the last 2 years, we've been pushing more of a communication method with our senior management teams. We all have meetings, we all communicate, but it's just another topic on their list of things to look at. So we've been mainly focusing on exceptions, not the day-to-day stuff we all do, we all good at. It's the specific impacts we have on the business. But it's that communication, it's the networking, it's building trusted relationships across, not just up into our exec teams, but actually across the wider spectrum of our business, because in my experience, working for IDEMIA for coming up 25 years now, everything is siloed. People have their own opportunities to do their own project works, they report, but cross-collaboration, even internally, is difficult. So this is where one of the things I get involved in is actually do more translation between technical people, business people, so then they can have a better understanding of how we work and what the importance is.
Exactly. Translator, I've often used that as describing what I do. I translate between the technical and the business side. So anything there to add?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, the Mars leadership team, they're very supportive, working with, the PCI SSC. In fact, they actually make PCI compliance as mandatory in their finance manual, right? So any business that is taking credit cards, they have to be PCI compliant. It's just that simple. But I think what sets them apart is they believe that it should be more of a business as usual type of activity. Let's kind of get that in there right away and not make it an afterthought. And I think that's very important, right? Because then we have buy-in from all different teams, whether it's treasury or finance, to sort of drive that message. And at the end of the day, right, it increases our security posture. We end up being better, and we can meet other NIST requirements and stuff like that. So it's absolutely great to have that support from them.
Great. So leaning into this year's theme of advancing payment security through global collaboration, let's talk a little bit about industry collaboration. It's clear that each of your organizations is invested. You're here this week, you're up on stage with me. But what are some of your thoughts about what more PCI can do to collaborate with the industry?
There you go. I feel like it's coming to me. So one of my, I think, one of the initiatives I'd really like us to see is for the newcomers. I think it's So one, it was great just to hear Nigel. He's gone from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. But also just there's a lot of people who, for various reasons, it's difficult for them to participate. And I would love for us to find maybe like a newcomer entry point, see if there's a way we can remove some friction for folks who perhaps they want to engage and they're not sure how, and maybe if it's as a sponsor, we can help sponsor them in. Just find innovative ways to bring more people into the community, I think would be really good. And then maybe some additional outreach in like the higher education space, just so that folks are aware, like there's a whole world here that helps keep this stuff secure. And for a lot of people, it can be a really good on-ramp into a security career.
No, I appreciate your feedback on that because, as you all know, and our audience knows, there's almost no company that comes into being today that doesn't come with a position with payments, to accept payments. There's no app out there that doesn't have a payment feature built into it. So I think it's critical that we ensure that the new players who are coming in at a faster rate than ever, I think it's critical that we find a way to connect with them and bring them into our community. So I want to give kind of the last part of this conversation. And if you have more to add on kind of those new players, please do jump in on that. But as we kind of start to wrap up our conversation, I want to think about and get each of your thoughts on how this community, made up of merchants, assessors, financial services companies, what should they do, as well as PCI, to remain engaged with the community and directly with PCI? And I'd say also, if you have any advice for any first-time attendees to a PCI community meeting, what would you share with them? How would you tell them to make the most of this week's opportunity? Because our conversation is just starting here today, but it's going to continue over the next several days. Thoughts, Nigel?
What should Nigel do?
Yeah, I was going to say. So this is my first PCI community meeting. So became more into the community around January, first BOA meeting in London. For me, the most important thing was name bingo. I was given a list of names that I have to go and see, list of organizations. You just go out there, speak to everybody, speak to as many people, and just engage. It's hard work to network. It's very hard, but it's fun because the community I found, everyone I've spoken to, doesn't matter what organization we're in, everybody's on the same wavelength. And it was an eye-opener for me because prior to that, it was all about PCI, compliance, tick box, that was it. When I came to the first BOA, it was very welcoming. That's just continued. As I said, meeting you guys behind stage has been great. Always working with PCI has been fun. So it's just you all have a voice, just use it. No one's going to think bad of you. That's the key thing.
Mm-hmm. Should we go? Jeff, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just communicate, right? Get out there, talk, ask questions. I think you guys already, step one, you're already here at the meeting, right? And I think that's very important. I remember my first meeting was actually back in 2019, and it was a little intimidating at first, to say the least. But right away, you start talking to people, and then you start to realize that everyone here comes from different background. Whether you're in audit or security or compliance, you have something to bring to the table. And I think that's very important because solving PCI compliance, involves that, right? You need a lot of different minds put together. So, I would say, go to the talks, track 1, track 2 is good, but also spend time during lunch. Talk to the person next to you. See what they're going up, what's going on. You'll see them next year, most likely. I'm sure see some of you folks in the past with some of these meetings, and it's always good to catch up again. And I think that's one of my it's one of my fun parts of the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, networking is absolutely incredibly valuable. It's I think something that people take away as a win as much as seeing the presentations from all of the different participants.
Yeah, I was going to say the networking is really important. I would say there's almost two opposite ends that you have to focus on. So we're going to pick on Jeff's shirt a little bit. So Jeff didn't realize until we were backstage, he has a Van Halen ready M&M t-shirt. So for those of you who don't know the Van Halen story and the brown M&M, I'd suggest you go and look it up. But Jeff doesn't have a brown M&M, which means he was focused on the details. So there's two sides. When you hear, like, attend the sessions and listen to the detail, because the detail is really important for day-to-day and getting the standards implemented. And then at the other end, the detail doesn't matter. It's the people in the room. Know people, be willing to talk to them, have what sometimes can be difficult conversations. You know, I'm also a PFI, and one of the things we've advocated as an investigator community is for people to talk to each other when there's been breaches, within the bounds of what's allowable, because otherwise nobody hears the experiences and the pain they've been through. And so that also helps people have business cases to support the security investments they need, the compliance innovation they want to take forward. So the communication is where you'll get those ideas and stories so that it's not necessarily about you specifically.
Yeah, that's really nice. Before we completely wrap up, I know I talked about, Andy, you and Jeff are a somewhat old guard. You talked about your first meeting was in 2018?
19.
19? Yeah. What about you, Andy?
I can't remember. Do you know, I think this is a bit of a moment for me, actually. The most embarrassing moment I've had from a community meeting was one that I didn't get to in the US. And I will
say, I did not ask for the most embarrassing.
But what I'll say is I think it was the 5-year video. So those of you who came, and there was a montage, and I had a client call me in the middle of the night and say, I've just seen more pictures of you than I've seen in like our entire time working together on it's either the 5 or the 10-year video. And I was like, okay, but it's midnight for me. So yeah, I've done quite a lot of them over the years. I think my favorite was probably the London one, not because it was on home turf, but mainly because it was just such a monumentally good event. We had the O2 Arena, there's all the Britpop that went with it. It was such a good event.
Second only to Amsterdam.
Second only to Amsterdam.
2025.
This is my new favorite.
And Nigel, is this your first or your second?
First.
First. All right. Well, we've already got you on the stage, so we're doing a fantastic job. So I would like for the audience to join me in thanking each of you for participating in today's panel. This has been a great discussion, and look forward to the continued discussions over the next several days. So thank you.
Thank you.